Imagine a presence that makes your mind sharper, your instincts clearer, and yet this presence feels completely alien. This is what working with the spirits in the Ars Goetia can feel like. Most people call these spirits demons, but they are really just mirrors and teachers reflecting hidden parts of our own minds. Some people do see these spirits as real beings, and some as archetypes of the mind that predates the history of Homo sapiens. I treat them as both, because my own experiences show both. Hi everyone, my name is Shani, and if you are new to this channel, then welcome. If you are a returning subscriber, then you are probably already familiar with me and with my style. Everything in this video comes from direct conversations and teachings that I had with my mentor before he passed away. It's also rooted in my own personal practices and experiences. I don't believe in teaching things that I have not personally practiced and experienced. But before we continue, let's quickly pause and clarify a key concept, and that is demons. There's a huge difference between demonology and then the demons mentioned in the Lesser Key of Solomon in the Goetia. Now, if you stay with me until the end, then I'll show you why these mentioned demons aren't actually demons at all. And by the way, they are also not evil. But more importantly, I'll show you how you can use them to literally upgrade your mind. I'll also share some personal experiences at the end. But I don't want this to turn into a history lesson. I should set the stage first for those of you who are not familiar with this topic. You say the word demon and half the room walks out, and perhaps the other half of the room will be oddly intrigued. So if you are familiar with the history, then just skip this part. If you are not, then watch this part. Please also remember to like this video and to subscribe to this channel. The Goetia was first documented in the 17th century grimoire called the Lesser Key of Solomon. The Ars Goetia is the first part of this grimoire. This presents spirits that interact with human consciousness through seals, through sigils, and incantations called ends. These spirits are seen as demons being part of the infernal, and each one has their own area of expertise. They are primal intelligences. They resonate with your subconscious, where they amplify latent instincts within you, hidden drives, and untapped faculties. Working with them isn't about controlling external beings. It's about confronting and then integrating the shadow and the brilliance within yourself. If you're new to this, then this might perhaps seem a bit too mystical, abstract, weird, or even frightening. But at its core, Goetia is about transforming yourself through direct experience, and each of these spirits, called demons, I personally don't like to use that term, but each of these spirits represents an archetypical energy, so a universal archetype that's usually associated with a suppressed part of the subconscious or unconscious mind. And these energies interact with your mind on a daily basis based on your readiness, your discipline, and mostly your nature. So, who are you? Some of them might sharpen your senses, Some confront your deepest fears, and others organize your thinking so that you can perceive patterns that were previously invisible to you. Today, most people view the Goetia through an Abrahamic lens, but we are not going to do that, because historically King Solomon and other magicians bound and forced these spirits, which I don't want to call demons, in a really coercive way. So whether we look at it literally or metaphorically speaking, it's like binding parts of your mind in a really disrespectful manner. So ask yourself this: if somebody bound and forced you to do their bidding against your will, wouldn't you also resist or become destructive? So we approach the Goetia in the same manner, with respect and not with coercion. We stand toe to toe with these beings, not above them, not below them, equal to them. And all of this will make much more sense as this whole story unfolds. The original Greek word daemon comes from Plato, and it's related to the concept of knowing. If we dive deeper, it also carries the meaning to divide, or destinies. So in practical terms, a daemon can mean one's fate, destiny, or even the spirit controlling your mind, or your genius, in other words. The word Goetia comes from Greek as well, and this means sorcery or witchcraft. The spirits of the Goetia are primal forces that existed long before humans. They arise from basic energies. They arise from moods like rage, lust, greed, hope, and compassion. These moods are, in a sense, the building blocks of life itself. They give these spirits shape and they allow them to interact with our minds. You might hear people call them elementals, but it's not quite the same, because traditional elementals like fire, earth, water, and air, they exist in a way that can relate to us humans through the world, through the shared material plane. So a fire elemental, for example, can feel pain in ways that us as humans can understand. Spirits of the Goetia are higher vibrational beings. They border on incarnation but don't share our physical reality. So they can claim the energy and the memories of a space, yet at the same time retain their own free will and remain independent of human expectations. That's why they often feel alien or even frightening. The Goetia are really old and primal. They are not gods, but they are something different from us and, in a sense, higher than us. They have sunk into their demonic status due to various different reasons, and here is where it becomes a bit tricky. You've probably often heard that the spirits in question are of an infernal nature, but what does that actually mean? When we look at High Magick, for an example, the infernal relates to the subconscious parts of the human psyche. So the spirits inhabiting these parts are personifications of energies or powers that lie dormant or buried in our subconscious minds. They are essentially qualities of our consciousness that we have disowned. We've buried them away. And because we've buried them away, we are not aware of them. And because of that, they have essentially slipped away or sunk into a demonic state, because they've slipped away from the conscious control of deity, and that deity is ourselves. They can be considered dangerous because as long as they remain unmastered, they can surface at any time and cause chaos in your mind and life. In a sense, this is what modern psychology blames as things hidden in the subconscious mind. Some people say working with these spirits brings out the worst in a magician, and that is exactly the point, because the goal is integration, not repression. If these disowned qualities remain hidden, then you, like the rest of humanity, will stay at the mercy of your own subconscious. By confronting, by identifying and mastering them, you gain the opportunity to upgrade your mind, to strengthen your faculties, and to take control of the powers within you. The first spirit of the Goetia that I ever worked with was Vassago. Vassago, the third spirit of the Ars Goetia, is a prince and he commands 26 legions. Traditionally, he is called good-natured and associated with foresight, hidden knowledge, and the untapped currents of the mind. A force that can expand intuition and perception beyond ordinary limits. I'm not going to go into the specific ritual setup in this video, simply because there's not time and it's an entire video upon itself. But I took the necessary precautions and preparations, casted a circle, and drew his sigil. So my primary focus when I started with this ritual was to use the sigil, his sigil, to activate his hidden or the hidden faculties of my mind, which are centered around foresight and intuition and gaining knowledge, etc. So I sat in the circle and I just looked at the sigil, but I didn't just look at it, like I looked at it with a very relaxed gaze. So think of it as sitting outside and looking at a tree when you are deep in thought. You are not looking at the tree, you are almost looking through the tree. After a while of looking at the sigil with a very relaxed gaze, very weird things started to happen. So, firstly, it's almost as if the lines of the sigil and the symbols started to blur, and then they started to shift. And then the whole sigil itself became three-dimensional, and then finally it started to glow, and it was... I can't articulate what that felt like because it was just so alien, and at that time, because I didn't know what to expect, I was a bit frightened at that point. But I wanted knowledge, I wanted intuition, I wanted foresight, and I knew those things were hidden inside my own head and I just needed to activate them. So I pushed through and I kept looking at the sigil, and just a quick side note, the methods in which sigils work are very complicated, so I should perhaps make a video dedicated to that topic alone. Back to the story. So I looked at the sigil as it started to glow and dealt with my initial feeling of just complete fright and what's going on. And I started to chant Vassago, which in itself could be considered an N. There's various different N's depending on the spirit that you're working with. So I started chanting Vassago, and the more I did that while looking and gazing into the sigil, and seeing the sigil change in front of me, the more aware I started to become of this presence. And next minute, this presence just filled the circle. And it still felt alien and it still felt strange. But as I calmed myself down and opened myself up and grounded myself in my will, what I wanted to achieve, the energy started to shift. And I didn't see Vassago appear, but the energy felt alien at first, and then it just felt expansive. And the magical part of this is that there was this beautiful playfulness to the energy. So it was a very weird shift to go from that initial state of frightful alien energy to this feeling of just expansion that you can't actually articulate. And then to feel this playfulness, like there's this thing that wants to show me something, but in a playful way. But at the same time, I had this underlying feeling of this being a double-edged sword, of there being some kind of warning attached to this energy. And it turns out that that feeling was spot on. So immediately as I sat there in the circle and felt this energy, and then after the ritual, I started to see a sharp increase in my intuition, in my dreams. Geez, just my dreams alone. That was mind-blowing. And I guess the most mind-blowing part of it all was this like thirst for knowledge that nearly drove me to the edges of sanity or insanity. So it's like I was in this expansive state afterwards, and I was just being flooded constantly with signals, with intuition, with dreams, with this constant like quest for knowledge. Interestingly, it's like the dormant part of my mind that was now activated, or the spirit of Vassago, however you want to look at this, taught me how to gain knowledge, but in a state of awareness. So it didn't point me towards a specific system or specific tradition or way of thinking or religion. It was just a general stream of awareness, of conscious awareness, and all the knowledge contained in that awareness. So Vassago showed me what knowledge is, and my intuition and my foresight certainly increased. But all of this overloaded my mind. And instead of just being content with what I have gained, because other parts of my being was still suppressed and I didn't realize or recognize that at that time, I started to spiral into some really dark traits. So it almost became a sort of obsession, gaining more knowledge, reading more books, just more the whole time. And because it was such a difficult thing to achieve, this level of gnosis that I wanted to gain, I started to become frustrated and agitated and even really angry and jealous at other people who I perceived had that knowledge. Ultimately, this experience taught me that these spirits amplify what's already in your mind, in your subconscious, your unconscious, and your conscious. And in my case, my quest and my desire for knowledge and expanded intuition and awareness worked in my favor. But at the same time, the latent parts of myself that weren't integrated, like anger, got triggered and it surfaced and it spiraled. So ultimately, there's a dual edge to working with the spirits of the Goetia, because they'll both amplify things within yourself, but also show you what you have not yet mastered about yourself. And that unmasking is not very comfortable. Bael is the first spirit listed in the Ars Goetia, and he's described as a king commanding 30 legions of spirits. He's associated with wisdom, shape-shifting, and unlocking hidden aspects of the self, often bridging instinctual, animalistic energies with conscious thought. Working with Bael can sharpen perception, enhance your intuition, and initiate you into deeper self-knowledge. But his energy is really intense and best approached with preparation and deep respect. My experiences with working with Bael differed depending on if I was working inside or outside of the circle. And yes, I did do workings outside of the circle. So outside of the circle, it was very chaotic, almost like a primitive part of my mind was being stimulated and stretched and electrocuted at the same time, but in a good way because I started to think differently. But inside of the circle, it was more like the circle absorbed his residual energy and I could just integrate and kind of make more sense of the entire experience. So after my workings with Bael, something really interesting started to happen and I started to see more cats and toads everywhere, not just in my waking states, but also in my dream states. So in my dream states, I started to experience a more lucid state of dreaming. I started to experience these weird shape-shifting dreams, and they were all mostly centered around cats. But just that experience alone, in waking and in dreaming, shifted my perception, my way of looking at the world, of interpreting the world and myself. It's very difficult to articulate exactly how that worked because the expansion, I believe, is so unique that you really need to experience that for yourself. But ultimately, in my opinion, I wouldn't say work with Bael as a beginner. Work with another Goethic spirit first. Just don't work with Bael. His energy is just too intense, and his energy changes depending on both the method of invocation or evocation that you use and also your mood while working with him, which is why it is really tricky to describe. It's a deeply personal experience. We can look at the Goetia as objective forces or as untapped parts of our minds, but only you can find the answer to this in your own practices. So practice. Don't stay stuck in theory or in terminologies. Don't make your life magic without making magic your life. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please like, share and subscribe if you did. Drop a comment below. You can also find me on Patreon. My link will be below. See you next time.